Welcome to the 69th episode of the Interstis podcast. My name is Dave. I'll be your host. I'm always your host. It's been a long time since I left you without a dope beat to step to. But that's all changed now, since mostly I would say that my life has sorted myself out to a point where I can return to being creative again, which is a great relief for me in that it's so fundamentally a part of what I like to do. And I know that there are people who kind of explicitly enjoyed that I made the podcast as opposed to any other form of content. So it's good to be able to reconnect with people that appreciate this more kind of long form stuff. And there's a lot to talk about, obviously, because I can't say perfectly. I looked at the site, but just for a moment there, I think it might be something like half a year since I discontinued working on these, which is a great tragedy because I enjoy doing them. But in the interim, obviously, there's so much that has happened. I can start. Well, let's start at the beginning. That would make the most sense. So basically, I lost my job in Kyoto. I had worked there for about a year and a half, and then due to circumstances at the end, I know I was fired, I was let go, whatever you want to call it. I have no ego associated with that. And I'm very much of the mind that a lot of these challenges that we go through, it's been true my entire life. And I think none more so than this moment right now that has proven if you're able to roll with the punches, if you're able to adapt, that these tragedies that occur can often be converted into like the best thing that ever happened to you. And there's just so many examples of that for this that I could think of, where it's probably the greatest evidence I've had for the divine that I could come out of something that was quite frankly so negative, but then have this positive result from it, where you're thinking afterwards, thank you so much for this negative experience, because it's meant that I've now moved on to other things. So basically, let's start from there. Let's start from this can just be kind of like a life update thing, where that happened. I was like, okay, so what do I do? This is a bit of a rehash if you've watched the newest video on my YouTube channel where I uploaded and I said, why did I disappear? I talked a little bit about this, but I'll do it again here because I know that absolutely not everybody saw that video, and then it's worth reiterating what I was talking about. So basically, I thought, okay, that's done. I can no longer do this for now, a creative thing. So what can I do to land myself back on my feet? And I looked at the sort of career options that were available to somebody like me. And I gotta say, I mean, the first one that would stand out most immediately for a guy like myself, that's somebody with like a Bachelor of Arts in History, and who during his time in Japan dedicated it to a YouTube channel, trying to get that started. What kind of things could I do now that I can no longer be this media director at this company? Okay, well, I could continue doing my YouTube. Okay, cool, but that means I've got to find some way to support that, right? I got to find some sort of alternative income, and what could accomplish that? And I thought, in the past, I had always been interested, kind of peripherally interested in the tech industry. I mean, that can be clear enough, obviously, with the the sort of stuff that all of these things that even allow a podcast to occur. You kind of have to be a little bit into the tech. You don't need to be highly technical though, because a lot of these like base level pieces of equipment aren't exactly the most complex things to learn, which is awesome. So when I'm interested in tech, what that meant was, okay, well, always been peripherally interested in software development. Well, why is that? Well, I played a lot of video games growing up, but that was because I played them as a result of my dad, and it's like one of my fondest stories. I know that I've talked about it already on the podcast, but let's revisit it again. My dad was a first generation programmer, and there's also all sorts of cool stories that I have from that. Like, he told me about his experience in university, and his experience in university, he saw some of the first computers that were ever constructed, and they would take up entire rooms, and he just knew that this was the way of the future, and he was technically minded but also technically skilled. He kind of had that innately in him, and he thought he would become a computer programmer. And so he became an engineer. He became an electrical engineer, but also, like, I don't know if it was a minor in computer science or whatever it was, but like full on became one of these first generation what would you call software engineers. And he can actually say engineer because officially from a university, that is what the designation they would give him. Whereas I know now that a lot of people, that term has lost some of the prestige associated with it. I don't even think necessarily that it should have, because if you can develop the skill set, it doesn't matter whether it comes from a university or not. But because people can do it of their own steam now, that yes, there's basically like less of a filter, so more people have access. But then the kind of overall talent pool that you're looking at when you look at software designers, computer scientists, is that they're not always accredited in the same way, and they could be of equal skill, but you don't know until you get down to the brass tacks with them. So my dad was really into it. Like, some people get into software development and it's like they do that, but it's more the people that they want to manage and the projects that they want to build, where it was in the code that my dad found himself most comfortable. He didn't want to move into like higher management roles. He wanted to build the code. And that was really cool. And it extended from his life into ours as kids. It's myself and my two other brothers, where he was one of the first people that was cracking these games and breaking whatever software protection was on them that would allow you to get something like Transport Tycoon or Commander Keen or Doom when it was first coming out, like this generation of games. And there was this time historically an explosion of games that were available, and so my imagination ran wild as a wild child, and it was great. Like, there's a couple things my dad did for me, one of which was to read to me a great deal. This is reiterating stories I've told on the podcast before, but let's do it again. When I was like 8 years old and my brothers were 10, he read The Lord of the Rings to us individually and together, and that unquestionably was formative to me. And Mysterious Island, and what else did he read? A whole bunch of basically classics, and then some like not so classics, but it was incredible. They left an indelible mark, and as did the games, because as a kid growing up, like a kid would know now, because there's consoles and PCs have been a part of everyone's life now, that it's not so unusual that kids would grow up with games and feel the benefits of them and the inspiration from them and the sort of creative skill building and all of these things that go along with playing games. I'm a huge advocate of games. I mean, anything can go into excess, but there's a number of studies that show people that play games have like greater cognitive adaptiveness. They're able to think, however they say it, like parallel thinking, is in they can hold multiple streams of thought within their psyche at any one given moment, more than those who cannot. And it makes sense, because you're doing games that rely on strategy, you're doing games that rely on resource management, you're doing games that quite frankly are just incredible stories again, so you're getting experiences of role models and stuff like that. And I had all of these wonderful conversations with my dad when I was growing up about the potential of games and where they would go. And it's kind of cool to feel like it all came true, and perhaps not quite yet to how we envisioned it, but I think that that's about a very short time away. I would probably say within the next 5 years, it'll reach this sort of aspirational thoughts that we had as we discussed it. Like, because of course, we had like Wolfenstein 3D, had these 2D games with sprites, and we had the conversation about how those would then one day evolve to become completely 3D, and they totally did. And then of course my dad was a huge reader of sci-fi, and so like there was great talks about like, could VR ever happen? And he had this little stint in the 90s where it sort of did, but it was more like vomit inducing, low resolution, way ahead of its time, but so far ahead of its time that the technology it was impossible. You just did not have the computing power to create the sort of experiences that would do anything other than nauseate you. But it was cool to see that happen. I remember being like a teenager, and I think for like a birthday or something, we had gone to the mall, and I don't think it's called Ascent, but it was like this crazy, one of the first like multiplayer games where it was fully that you would fly in every single direction, almost like a space sim, except that it was down these corridors. I wish I could remember the name of that game. But anyways, always loved games. Then that I continued to enjoy them for my whole life. I was a part of the World of Warcraft, when that first came out, had great experiences with it. Endless. Games are a topic that I could just go on ad nauseum, that I enjoy them so much. But then I went into these other creative things. Another thing my dad did is he took me to so many movies. I was looking some time ago at like a list from 1997 of all of the movies that were released in that year. And it was shocking to me because you don't really have quite the same sense of it at that time when you're growing up, where now I've had so much time away from it that you don't know how much you were being exposed to it. But he took me to like 85% of the released movies that came out in the theaters that year. So I loved visual media, being transported to different worlds, reading, all that kind of stuff. And that, I think, when I finally got to Japan and then I picked up a camera for the first time, actually, I didn't even pick up a camera. I used the webcam that was in my laptop at the time. I realized how much I would enjoy taking this to another level. And so I kind of naturally found my voice in creating videography like projects. But then when you start your channel, you get pretty far along with it, as I said, and I couldn't quite support myself full time with doing YouTube. Well, what was this other, as until now, skill set that was related to all these things, but I'd never really seriously got into? Well, that would be software development. And where the door was very much closed in terms of a more traditional academic approach to this. For example, like my GPA is just like quite low. I was joking with Connor, who's now like my business partner for the new business. I'll like go into that actually towards the end. I want to promote the business here as well, but that can be slotted in at the end. That yeah, I was telling him I finished my school. I never did that well in it. Although I had a good, I had like a high average going into my university, and it was good university, but I did not excel there. And I was like the Van Wilder, where I was taking extra years to complete. I went back to raise my GPA, and I think it actually lowered my GPA, which is kind of funny. Life is a comedy. You gotta laugh at yourself. But that is something to do with academics, and it's something I'm sure people more educated than myself could have a conversation about, which is that the educational system, well, of course, they're doing the best that they can, and there's fantastic professors. I had a lot of great teachers through university and so on, but something in a system that testing is a weird thing where some people, they excel at it. So just to allude to him again, my business partner now, Connor, this is a guy you can test, and he loves testing, and he excels in it, and he does very well. Whereas any test, it seems like no matter how hard I've studied, no matter how well I know the material, something about the way that you extract that information from your mind while writing a test is my Achilles heel. I can put in so much effort that it really seems disproportionate to the results, where you're like, this guy, he studied so hard. When we were talking to him beforehand, he seemed to know everything, but then the end result is catastrophic. So yeah, not the best testing individual, and for that reason, in traditional academic settings, I'm not that strong. In fact, that would be an understatement. I'm weak, frankly. I'm not. But weakness is not weakness if you flex your strengths. You just got to find your strengths. And mine is very much, it's in the tangible, it's in the material world, when I can actually apply myself to something that doesn't require in a precise moment for you to know exactly what to do. If I'm given an opportunity to look something up, to build something slowly, to take my time with understanding something, then I think very often I end up understanding things better than some people who do get it at first more quickly than I do. So play to your strengths, this, that, and the other thing. Now, you can probably guess that this was, well, here's, okay, eating a few words. I was trying to decide what to do, and I thought, okay, I'm going to try software development. I could do like the university thing, but I don't think that's practical anymore, because if you're going to get a job with this kind of profession now, they basically just want to know that you're capable, that you can do it. And that's awesome for me. So it means that you don't have to go down the so traditional path. You can be a little bit unorthodox. And there are things now available that just, matter of fact, were not available before. And these are these boot camps that you can go to. And they should not be underestimated. The boot camp that I went to is called Lewagen. And Lewagen is this franchise out of France. It's French, or that's its basis. They have many, like, they franchised it, so they have a number of like different boot camps that you can go to around the world. And I got invested in this. I had a friend who told me that you can actually, if you apply for this in Japan, that the Japanese government will reimburse you about half the cost of the course, and if you were to find a job afterwards, that they'll give you another 20% of your tuition back. So really good option if you were looking at trying to expand your skill set, go into a different field. And I thought this would be really cool to try. Here we are. I'm finally going to get into software development, where I'd always thought it was cool, but it never really made sense for me in the past before. And leading into this course, I took about 3 months to study beforehand. I had recommended to me by the guy who runs, or I should say is like the head Boomba at Lewagen in Tokyo. He told me that a really good resource that you could use is called the Odin Project. And it was a great suggestion. I actually started with, it was like, I can't remember if it was like, it was something, before I started with the Odin Project, I was actually doing this thing that was designed for kids, which was quite humbling, because when you get into it a little bit further, it's actually quite challenging, and it's totally fundamentally no different than what you learn when you get into the advanced stuff. So it's more like this childish skin cosmetic put over the top of what is really useful information. And I believe it's called Code Monkey. So if you're looking at, like, maybe you got kids and you see an aptitude for them or an interest and you'd like them to try, you could go to Code Monkey and you can sign them up for free, and you can do all of these preliminary, just grasping the basics of what software, what coding is, and then it goes into more advanced things like Ruby and so on. Ruby being like a programming language. So I used Code Monkey for a while, and then when I was getting ready, or once I spoke with the gentleman who is kind of, like I said, the head Boomba at Lewagen, he recommended the Odin Project, and then I started doing the Odin Project. And that was really good, because the Odin Project, of course, well, Code Monkey is very good. The Odin Project has a lot of great fundamentals that you would find incredibly useful to have touched upon before you went to a boot camp. So things, for example, like GitHub. GitHub is this place where you can store your code. So whenever you make a project, the language, the Lingity that you have there, it's called a repository. You can store your repositories on GitHub, GitHub being owned by Microsoft. And you learn how to store them there, and you realize that there's this other thing called Git. And Git is basically a version saving software. So as you're programming, it's important that you create milestones for you where a new feature has been completed, or this page is done, whatever it may be. And they're checkpoints that if something were to go wrong, you could go back to that checkpoint and revert to it if need be, because further down the line, things got irreparably messed up. So I learned how to use GitHub. I got more in depth into CSS. There was a project where you just made like a landing page. CSS being like the styling code that you use, which people would argue is not actually coding. but the sort of styling language you use for websites. So I got into some CSS, did a little bit of Ruby, did some JavaScript as well, a couple of different things like this. And so I prepared for 3 months, and then I got into the course. And I'm so glad that I prepared. I don't think that this would be everybody's experience. In fact, guaranteed that it's going to be quite unique for everyone. But the first day I felt confident, in charge, like all of my studying had paid off. But then following that, it dropped off a cliff, and I had to face the challenge demon once again because it was so difficult. The method that we used to create software was called MVC, which stands for Model View Controller, and that within it has like a database. It has how your web pages, if you do it as a web app, how they'll be organized, how to do it all, and the manipulation of logic, the manipulation of information is essentially what coding is. So if you need to create, for example, a list of 10 people, and your app is going to tell you who is available, all of that information, all of those details need to be stored in a database, and you learn how these databases would operate, how to pull information out of them, how to pull particular types of information out of them, all of these different things. I won't labor too long here because we don't need to go into the stats of it, but I'm just making the point that it was technical and it was difficult, and in a very short period of time, I steeled myself versus this, once again, frankly, disappointing level of ability where I thought, man, am I never going to find something that could make great money, but at the same time I could be good at? YouTube always has that fantastic potential available for you there, but it's less certain, of course, than if you had a job coding. You know, if you were like a full stack programmer, that you'll be making 100K in no time as soon as you get out of your junior software years. But midway through this program, I got like a couple of weeks in and was determined to learn at my own pace. It's fine. I'm bottom of the class easily of 32 people, but what is this great Stoic thing that they're always talking about, is that for the fact that we cannot control the circumstances of our life, what we really have control of is just how we react to it. This is old wisdom, and it's so true, it's so useful, and so long as you can get behind that, you accept whatever the circumstances are, you manage your response, and you get to work. And that's what I did, where I thought, okay, I am going to be the slowest in this class, but I am not going to be broken by that fact. There's my response to it. That's good. And I had such good days still, where at first, I think it was one or two, where when that sunk in, and once again, you're reminded of like, oh, this is a steep incline that you're going up. Once I got past those 2 days and just reaffirmed that that's fine, I really got to focus on the sort of experiences I had with other people in the class. So the way that it would work was, you would start a day, there would be a lecture in the morning, probably flashcards that you were to have done the previous night. They also recommended watching the next day's lecture beforehand, and it was a really good idea. For somebody like me, I could say unequivocally that if I watched the lecture beforehand, I would understand the day of. And if I didn't, that first exposure was often not enough at all. So really good to do that. But each day you would have your lecture in the morning, and then after you have the lecture, there would be these, for the first couple of weeks anyways, there would be these series of challenges that would be applying what you had learned in the lecture, and you would be partnered off with somebody else in the class, and you were to work through them together. And so you had this fascinating dynamic of not only what is your ability as a programmer, having learned whatever new concept, but what is your ability as a collaborator? And this was, for me, this is like interrelational stuff is more what I'm interested in than like technical numbers. I found that probably the most fascinating thing, assessing people's ability to do this. I would end up with people who were brilliant compared to me, but they would want to do their own thing. And so my day would be basically not useless, but at this snail's pace. Then you'd meet somebody who was brilliant and they would collaborate with you super well. And that would be somebody who was very intelligent, and I'd have a great day with them. And then you'd meet these, I'm just going to go through all these different types. You would meet people who were so good at collaborating that they may even be still miles above you in ability, but they're so good at collaborating that they're able to bring something out of lowly you that is able to contribute to them. And I thought that was incredible, that somebody could be so far ahead of me but still find something useful in what I had to say. So cool. Then you would meet people who were, politically speaking, not so good at partnering and not so good at coding and not so good at anything. And that's fine. We're not supposed to all have the same skill sets. These people are lovely people in their own right, and their own lives and subjective experiences to contend with. In that time, while we were doing these different challenges, I met who would end up being my business partner now. I met Connor, and Connor, in absolute polar opposite to me, was top of the class. And not only that, this was a guy who had no experience with coding other than the little bit of preparation that he had done beforehand, which makes that quite a feat, where there were people who had come to the class that had actually had jobs in software development, and they were not as strong as Connor was. And that was really interesting to note, that like this dude right here, he's got something going on when it comes to his ability to code. That's very, very cool. And we developed a rapport with each other, and he had actually watched my channel before coming. That's how he introduced himself. He was like, oh, I watched your channel. I was like, oh, well, that's so cool. Thank you so much. What a random place to run into somebody that watched what I was making before. And we hit it off and just talked of life and, travel, coding itself, philosophy, all these great topics. No, I love everything to talk about. And that went well. He would come in, he'd crush out, probably show up late. He'd show up late and then finish before everybody else. And then very generously with his time, he would be like, how you doing? And he would come over, and very patiently, he would, without taking the wheel, he would more like ask me questions. Well, if that does that, then what should this do? I was like, okay, very good guide. I know that he doesn't view himself as a very good teacher. That's like another skill other than being able to code, being able to teach somebody to code. That's a totally different thing. But it was hugely appreciated, because that meant that I kept moving along, whether I had a good partner that day or not, and then I'd get at least a little further grasp on whatever the concept was that we were doing. And then this progressed and continued along, and it finally got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm doing well enough. It's going to take many months afterwards to get myself into a position where I could really do the back end, as they call it, which is where all the the logic happens. But that's okay. I'm fine with that. And then they sprung upon us this amazing thing, which would be one of the weird universe things, where I read the whole syllabus, and I swear I didn't see this in it. Obviously it was there. I'm not saying there's anything that spooky going on, but I read through the whole syllabus, but then they told us that, upcoming within the next 10 days, a part of your end project, in fact, the most significant thing that you will do here, is each of you needs to pitch to the entire class an app that they want to build. Once you pitch it to the class, everybody's going to vote on whatever project they want to work on, and then for the last 2 weeks, you're going to build these projects, and this will be for your portfolio, something you could show off to people when you were doing job hunting afterwards, and evidence of what you have learned. And I am not the worst at coming up with ideas. That's something I like. I like spending time in that world, imagining pulling things into existence that aren't here yet. And I had this thought that right now we are at a pivotal time in history, due to the kind of tsunami of generative AI that all of a sudden has become popularized with ChatGPT. And now Google and Facebook and all these other companies realizing that they're behind the ball and they need to release. Now, that could be a whole nother conversation about like the moral implications of this and what it means for humanity and how carefully we should proceed. But the lay of the land is that this is now something that people can use to create things. And most importantly for me, hearkening back to what I've already said about loving stories, the first most widely accessible one that we had was ChatGPT, and that is a text-based interaction that you're dealing with there. And I thought, well, I could pitch something that I'd already envisioned in a practical way, how ChatGPT could be used to help people tell a story, write a story, edit a story. I had actually gone in with my old novella, like I wrote a little, I don't even know if it's 100 pages novella, but I fed all of that through ChatGPT and asked it what it thought and places that I could improve, and spent some time there. And so I thought, okay, well, that's like at a glance, that's like, okay, it can help a storyteller just straight up sit down with it and brainstorm and be fed the writing that you've done, and that'll be cool. But I thought, what if you had like a more interactive kind of like fun way that this could get applied? And it came to my mind that I play Dungeons and Dragons, and that is a story-driven game. That is something that you're constantly ad-libbing and freestyling, and you need for the game master or dungeon master, you need for them all sorts of narrative assets, like a mysterious stranger approaches in your game, or you come upon a castle or a tavern. And I thought, could you not use these new AI to help you generate those in like a slick interface that would support that game? And so I had a conversation with ChatGPT, and it was like, yep, you can totally do that. And there's the OpenAI, that's the company that owns ChatGPT. There's the API. An API is basically what allows for an application to communicate with something like ChatGPT to incorporate it into the app. So if you've got some cool thing over here and you want to put it into your app, you can use an API to be able to do that. So ChatGPT had an API. Okay, checkbox. And then I said, could we do this, 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 and this? And it said, yep, you can definitely do that. Gave lots of great support. Very cool. So I made this pitch and I got it all ready. And kind of, I mean, comedically in retrospect, as I say, you have to take, like, life has to be a comedy. Once you can step down out of your adrenaline or whatever, emotive neurotransmitter is flowing through your body. I prepared this pitch, and I'll make a long story short here because I know that this is rehashing for anybody who actually saw the new video that went up on my channel. It failed because I did it in PowerPoint, and then they didn't even want to use my computer. They could only use the Mac that they had. I didn't have a Mac, or I should say just theirs. They were going to use Google Slides. I had been in the Japanese educational system for many years, so all I'd used was PowerPoint. And I got up there and I got to the point in my presentation where I was now going to introduce the name of the app and quite literally what it does. This is after a few jokes. And it broke, like on the screen where it was said Radiant, and Radiant does this and that. It broke, which is funny in retrospect. It didn't feel funny at the time, and I thought that nobody would vote for it. But they did. Connor got into my group. I got these two other great colleagues to work with, and the point was made that while I was building my pitch, I was asking everybody for feedback, what they thought of it. And so I had actually pre-pitched. That's what Connor said, that you didn't need to go up there because everybody already knew what it was that you were building. So it was like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. In fact, that's incredibly humbling. And it was like, oh, my big mouth, me asking questions was foundational to me being able to do this. You should ask questions. If somebody ever tells you that you shouldn't be able to ask questions, don't trust that person. Let me just say that is a bad, less than good mentality. Let's soften it. Less than useful mentality, and it prevents learning, it prevents communication, it prevents understanding. So I was really happy about that, and shocked, obviously, because I thought, oh, I didn't think about speaking to people beforehand. I only thought about the presentation. and it bombed so badly that I thought it was dead in the water. But it wasn't. I got a great team, and I'm so proud of basically the prototype that we built during that time. And we had a great presentation. People commented that it went very smoothly. We rehearsed it a lot. We had this final, I guess when I say presentation, once you constructed this prototype, you then had a day at the end, which was where all these people were invited. It was probably something like 60 people, or roughly a number around that. And you went up and showed them what it was that you were working on. And it was quite well received. Very proud of the guys, everything that they did. And along this process, I realized that given my skill set while I was in the boot camp, given my ability, let's say instead, that it really was going to be, if I wanted somebody to hire me as a software developer after this, that I was going to need like another 3 intensive months or something like that to be a coder, like a pure coder, sure. But I realized, well, that's not even, much as I would enjoy doing that, and I have incredible respect for the people who have that skill set, that isn't my strength. My strength is more like the ideas, the vision, the coordinating and processing of these ideas, this vision, then translated to the people who can work on the individual parts to pull it into existence. And so if I've got this idea that I believe in, and I really do, and I think that what we're doing with Radiant now is not a question of if, it's a question of when. This is simply going to happen. We had a chance to be a pioneer, to do something that was never done before. The fact that the API and its usage, the OpenAI API, its usage, we were the first boot camp to have access to that API. What kind of moment in history is that? What kind of moment in history is it that the exact time that I went to this Lewagan boot camp, that Connor was there, that I got this incredible business partner out of it? It was, it was spooky stuff that was going on. And one thing I'm a big advocate of is that you will have these opportunities in life if you generally direct yourself towards them. But it doesn't guarantee in any sense that they're ever going to come to fruition. They still require action. You'll see signs. You'll see like, oh, this and this and this and this match up. But they're waiting for you to still make a choice. You have to take further steps. They do not happen of themselves. And so I thought, okay, this is my chance to have a business. Not that it wasn't with YouTube. I still consider YouTube like a connected creative business that I'm working on, but let's say in a more traditional sense. And I'm taking it. I'm doing it. I am not going to look back in 10 years and say that, oh, all the stars aligned. And I was like, no, let's just play it safe. Like, what is it? I've said to a few people within this last week that a quote that I really enjoyed from Jim Carrey, when I've heard him talk about his experience growing up, it refers to his dad, where his dad, Jim Carrey's father, was, for all, as he describes him, he was a hilarious guy, really funny, made the whole family laugh. But rather than follow his dreams, he took the safe path. And that safe path in the end, and you can see how much this affects Jim, it was brutal. It really beat him up, and it wasn't good for his father. And so he says, Jim Carrey says, he saw at that point that you can fail at what is safe, or you could fail at what you love. So is the choice not then obvious which you should choose? So who cares the end result to this? At least I chose to fail at what I love if ultimately I'm not able to succeed. I'm wondering how much sound we're going to get in here. I'm recording this because I live in a share house right now. When I was going to this boot camp, I've gone to a internet cafe, and at the internet cafe, I'm in a karaoke booth. So we may have a little bit of a bass line coming in next to us, but whatever. That's cool. And I think now I'm like, this is all good character. This leads into other things. So we're going to start this business. How are we going to start this business? Well, we need a place where we could work on this, where the cost of living would be low and the adventure would be high. So my dad as I have described, he's this programmer, and I thought, well, my dad lives in Thailand. He would have been a great resource for me to simply go. I was gonna like live next to him. I was gonna move in like to the same apartment complex as him, and I was just gonna like study. And then if I had trouble studying, I was gonna go next door and say, "Hey, Dad, help me with my software development." And so he was gonna be my professor during that time. But now that we've decided to do the business, I thought, well, it's still kind of the same thing. Like, he doesn't need to coach me now in the same way. It would more actually be he is a great resource for Connor. I can do all of my stuff on the front end being like the design and layout and sort of the schmoozy stuff to do with the website design. But my dad will be there as a great resource for Connor and myself, but perhaps more Connor now since we're working on this as partners in Thailand. So let's go to Thailand. And that is its own cool thing where I was like, okay, we got to get over there. We got to be as much as possible comfortable when we're there. That what are we going to have to do for visas? Because a lot of people have this method where they go in and you can get 45 days. And then after the 45 days, you just jump out of the country, say over the border, and then you jump back in and you get another 45 days. But for consistency and finding like housing and stuff like that, it's likely not so reliable for people who are working on a project like we are. So we did a little more research, and watching the world change, as I love to, I noticed that Thailand has recently released something called the Smart Visa class. Now, it's basically for startups, and they have all these different tiers, and a part of that is actually going to have something to do with the speed bumps that we've experienced along the way. It is so new. They have a 6-month version, a 1-year version, and a 2-year version of this visa. And at the entry level, to be able to get this visa, this startup visa, you need to give them a business plan, and the government has to deem this as a viable business plan, that they would welcome you into the country for 6 months, and they review it and let you know whether or not that can happen. And if you do one of these, they will give you up to 4 team members that can be covered under this single business plan that could come into the country. And I thought, okay, so we got room for like team members. We got Connor in there. I'm going to bring over Aya. Aya's going to be our community manager. So we got 3 people that can take advantage of this. But it has been a bit of a thing because it's so new. Connor pointed out, he was like, your application is 339, mine's 337. I believe that means that they have only processed 300 of these. So that's not a lot. And it means that, well, the Thai government may know very well what it is that they're doing. That information is definitely not being conveyed to the different consulates around the world, because we've done all the processing, we've gotten all the approvals, and we were just the other day going into the Thai consulate here in Japan, in Tokyo, to get our visas processed. And the woman there, who was lovely, super helpful, very warm, she was confused because she said to me, oh, we're used to business visas, but the only ones that they have for that are usually 1 year. So I've never seen this before. I was like, oh, wow, we're literally the first people that have ever done this in Tokyo. I mean, it kind of makes a little bit of sense. I mean, how many people in Tokyo are doing startups in Thailand? Probably not that many, but still, to be the very first to have ever done it, it tickles my pioneering spirit very much. But it means that there's extra communication needed, because she's now had to like go and confirm with the Thai government that like this is a 6-month thing, it's not a 1-year thing. And our other team member, Aya, when she's in Osaka, it was the same thing for her. She was like, we've never heard of the Smart S visa before. Like, it's just, oh man. So I expect that Thailand is going to communicate this to their other consulates and give them updates, but certainly not yet. And that's something that we've had to overcome, but also makes me feel like I'm a little bit in the right direction again as well, because we're treading where others have not dared yet to do so, and that feels really, really good. So it's all getting sorted out, and we've submitted, tomorrow we're going to be able to go and pick up the visa. They just needed to confirm with the Thai government. If they really need more evidence tomorrow, I can show them on the Board of Investment webpage for the Thai government where it says 6-month smart S-class visa. But, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out as we go, and that's fine. And now, by the 14th, I'm not sure when this will have gone up. I'll probably do it very, very quickly. But by the 14th, we will be over in Thailand. We've organized a week in an apartment there. Already loving the affordability of Thailand. Like, we've gotten a week in this, like, 2-bedroom apartment in the middle of Bangkok. Super nice. And it's quite affordable. And then when we've been looking at houses as well, the housing situation is incredible. Even in Bangkok, like if you were to go out to like a more rural area like Chiang Mai or something like that, you'll get so much for so little, but you still do get that benefit when you're in Bangkok, which is amazing. You can be in this like hugely developed city and not have to think that you're going to be charged an arm and a leg for where you're living. Now, Tokyo has some options like that, but you're going to definitely be in a share house, for one, if you want to get that sort of like cheap, affordable living. If I were in Canada, heaven help you. Canada's housing situation, I mean, it's probably of the 3 topics that get mentioned in Canadian news, which I'm grateful for. I like that Canada's boring politically. One of the big ones, though, is that housing in Canada is prohibitive. Like, I'm from the west coast of Canada. Good luck. Like, the humor, I mean, if you go to like the Vancouver subreddit, just like all the jokes about, people who paid 6 bushels of strawberries for a house that's now worth, $3 million, and it's not even that good, not even in that nice of a location. It is so hard. Polarization of wealth is absolutely a factor that's affecting Canada. I even saw the other day, I'm just going on tangents here, but like I was watching this like Russian mob boss talk about like how he had created a successful business, however legally or illegally did that. And one of the things that he pointed out was, if things aren't working for you in whatever country you're in, someone who's really serious about starting a business, they'll just do it in another country. And I was like, okay, I can't agree with a lot that Russia's doing right now, but I can agree with this mob boss that you got to take a risk, and if you can find a better situation in another country, that you should do so. So I'm really excited for that. And I've always had this, I like adventure. I mean, that was the whole thing coming to Japan. I studied the history, but I had this itch that there's got to be more to life. There's this whole big world. I mean, I always talk about how a major aspiration of mine was to like, I want to visit another planet. In reality, I can say this now, definitely, when you travel, you might as well be going to another planet. A little less so in North America because, well, we are different. Canadians and Americans are so similar in other ways. I mean, you meet a Canadian with the right accent, and you'd never know if they were Canadian or American, and vice versa. I mean, you get Americans saying that they're Canadians when they travel abroad, right? That's because we have these similarities. But when you go to more distinct places, for example, when you come to Japan, when you go to Thailand, I'm sure if I were to visit places all over Europe, you really get the sense of like, wow, like I might as well have left on a spaceship and landed in a totally other place. And I love that. And I really like that, as far as I can see, the world is moving towards a global home. The permeability of borders is becoming not so much an issue anymore. I mean, I even saw, and this was a crazy thing to me, was that Canada is releasing a digital nomad visa, where I was like, oh, Canada, you're desperate. I was like, I don't know who's going to come there as a digital nomad with the housing costs, but everybody's trying to make their countries a little bit more permeable. The ability for people to travel is much easier. I mean, I've seen on Instagram Reels, there's like little subcultures that are like popping out now and being described by the younger generation like passport bros. I mean, I guess I'm a passport bro, but to me that was just traveling to other countries. But now it's done so ubiquitously by so many people that there's this like subcategory of describing the way that people behave as that. And I actually think that's great, because when you travel, there's a couple of really important things. I mean, one of them obviously is that you do not realize the way in which a culture is influencing you, or your behavior is formed as a result of a culture, so much. You don't realize it so much if that's the only ever place that you've been, because you would forgive people of this, but you assume there is this kind of like, this is the way the world works, and there's so many ideas that are actually local to that culture that as soon as you leave, you realize, oh, there's many ways to be social, to be caring, to be hardworking, to value your life. And I think that's really good, because it humanizes us. It means that we stop seeing each other as the other, and that results in such issues, such massive issues. I mean, we're definitely, with all of the major challenges that are faced in our world now, so many from whether it's AI, because you can think of the implications of AI on political systems, on jobs. If you think of global warming, all of these things are going to require global cooperation. And if there's permeability between countries and we're speaking to each other more, I think that that's going to welcome communication, rather than the nightmare, which has become that we become increasingly seclusionary, and increasingly with this scarcity mindset of my resources hoarded against your resources, and inevitably that leads to conflict and misunderstanding. So I think it's good to travel. I'm excited to travel in a broader sense. I think that it's great for the rest of the world that this is now something people have the option to do. Not everybody. I know that some people are locked in. I mean, it's really cool right now. Like at my share house, I've had this conversation. It's a great guy. He's actually really into Dungeons and Dragons. And so he's been a person who's given invaluable feedback. He was talking about it because he's from Arkansas. And he said, just as I'm talking about now, that when you don't travel and you get locked into this one way of seeing the world, it distorts the rest of the world, because somebody could say, oh, I visited a large city, and maybe they say something like, he was saying the capital of Colombia, but I can't remember the name of it. But anyways, very large. And then when he told people, or his father told people about this capital that he visited, they were like, oh, well, that sounds like this town. And it was their largest town, but it paled in comparison. But they just can't imagine it. It was actually my roommate who then went on. I was like, good on you. There you go. He immediately then brought up, I love to hear, not that I should, this is my own ignorance affecting my opinions of things, but it's just cool to hear somebody with like the southern accent from Arkansas, and they bring up Plato's cave analogy, where those people sitting in the cave only see the shadows from the light cast behind them, and that then means that they aren't truly seeing reality. It's like, this is, destroy all your assumptions about the southern accent and like somebody being a hick or uneducated. I was like, baller, that's so cool. Right on, man. I'm glad to have this discussion with you. But it all leads to a next exciting new chapter in my life. I hope for the people that I'm doing it with, because when the tide rises, we all benefit. I mean, except for global warming. But figuratively speaking, when the tide rises, we rise together. And that's what I want. I don't want or have any desire or any need to be individually successful. I don't need to be a dragon on my hoard. I like money, in fact, is simply this means to an end. It always has been. I only want to be free to pursue things that feel purposeful and like they might improve the lives of others while giving me an outlet to make things. And I really hope that this project can be that for everyone that's involved. And I want to bring in more people, and I want to have in a not even to be good. It's like I want to be careful with that too. Like not some kind of guru thing or anything like that, but not but just because it's fun. It just so happens that what's fun is often good for everybody. That we all succeed is fun. That we work on things is fun. That we share our success is fun. It just so happens that that's better for the rest of the world if that's what it is that we're all doing together. Now, I know it's going to have all these challenges, and I am not, impervious to pain and disappointment and losing hope. We all, losing hope is easy. But I'll persevere through it. That's one thing I know, is that when I get off the horse, I get back on. When I fall off the horse, I get back on. And I will not cease to do so. And I cannot wait to do this more. This is obviously, I'll do this, and I'll do it with myself until I can get more set up in Thailand. But then I would love to return to having guests on again. Absolutely. No doubt. And I can always see as well that having those interesting conversations with people when they come onto the podcast means that there's better engagement. It just gets more people involved. And the most important thing of all is that when I have people onto the podcast and they come on as a guest, I get out of my head. This is like a form of journaling for me, which is cool, where whatever I've considered, I can now articulate it, and then I can see it in front of me, and I understand my thought process better. I can see the shadow places where I've not been honest with myself about things, or I've not been able to see them as clearly. But when you get somebody else on, you get a whole nother perspective. And that's maybe, let me check the time here. That's the note that I'll end on, which is really, really cool. Every single person that I have asked for feedback on Radiant, this new business, every single person that I spoke to gave excellent input on what could make it better. That's incredible. That seems to me almost impossible. Wouldn't someone say something useless? Wouldn't someone have nothing to contribute? But we all do. We all have something to help each other and make the world and our projects and our dreams better and more likely to come true. And I'm going to very much continue with that mindset. So I'll do the plug here at the end. If you would like to check out the Radiant AI assistant, which helps you tell a better story when you're playing games like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder. It is at radiant-assistant.com. You can go and check it out there for free. Register, make an account. Our company website, which is a great name, I like this. It's called Chronicle. To find the company website and to learn a little bit about myself, a little bit about the partners, the team members that I'm doing it with, that's at about-chronicle.com, and you can go there and check out the team members and read about our initiative and so on. And most critically, most of all here, we need feedback. Just like I said, everybody has had something to contribute. Even if you're not really into Dungeons and Dragons and you just want to look at the site and go, oh, this looks kind of cool, or this was difficult to use, or this was intuitive or not intuitive. If you just want to poke around there, please do, and contact us through on About Chronicle. We have all of our social connections, social networks that you could contact us through. Contact us. Let us know what you think. Let us know what is awesome, what you don't like, what you think could be on it, what could be better, what looks cool, what could look cooler, all of this stuff. And I'll appeal as well that if you would like to support us, that's amazing. We are entirely self-funded and will be so for the next 6 months. If you can support us on Patreon, that would be amazing. We have a Patreon set up specifically for Radiant, but of course there is my channel as well. If you support me on Patreon there, that would be sick. It would be killer. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I'm so glad to be back. Such good therapy to get these thoughts out of my mind. I hope that you're doing really well and surviving the summer heat okay. I will catch you in the next one. If you are interested to come on the podcast and to be a guest, please do let me know. Love to have a good conversation with other people with different perspectives. That's going to be it for now. Peace.